The glass dome above them shimmered like frozen starlight. Every crystal facet caught the chandelier's brilliance and flung it across the ballroom in fractured rainbows that looked too perfect to be real. Beneath that sterile beauty, hundreds of guests smiled the same rehearsed smiles. The orchestra played a waltz so elegant it ached. Cole Walker stood at the altar with the composure of a man signing another business merger. The tailored black suit framed his tall, angular body. The silver cufflinks gleamed like armor. His gray eyes, sharp, cool, measured, revealed nothing of the man inside. Across from him, Isabelle Monroe took a slow breath, the satin of her gown whispering against the marble floor. Her dark skin glowed under the glass dome, and the green of her eyes caught a flash of defiance. There was no tremor in her voice when she said, "I do." They were two actors performing a flawless scene, each aware that every camera in the room captured their union, each knowing this was not love. It was a transaction, a rescue for her family's debt, a safeguard for his reputation. The applause that followed felt like shards of ice falling. Later, as the last guests departed and the music faded into silence, the grand estate of the Walkers became a mausoleum of luxury. Cole dismissed the servants with a curt nod. The night air carried the scent of rain through the open window. He loosened his tie, poured a drink, and turned toward the woman who was now, legally, his wife. She stood near the piano in the corner of the room, fingertips brushing the polished ivory keys as if they might burn her. "You play?" he asked, voice low, flat. "Once," Isabelle said. The single word hung between them, both a confession and a warning. Cole took a sip of his whiskey. "Then why did you stop?" She met his gaze. Life stopped listening. He almost smiled. Almost. The silence between them thickened, not awkward, but charged. Cole felt something inside him stir, something he hadn't let himself feel in years, curiosity. There was an elegance in her stillness, a quiet strength that defied the submissive role she was supposed to play in this arrangement. He had agreed to marry her out of necessity. His father's will had demanded it a union between the Walker name and the Monroe estate to settle an old business bond. He'd expected obedience, gratitude, maybe fear. What he hadn't expected was the steady, unflinching gaze of a woman who looked like she had already walked through hell and come back untouched by the flames. "Do you always hide behind politeness?" Isabelle asked suddenly. Cole raised an eyebrow. "And you? Do you always start a war on your wedding night?" Her lips curved faintly. Maybe that's the only way to survive one. The grandfather clock ticked. Midnight. Cole set his glass down. "Let's get one thing clear," he said, voice cool. "This marriage, whatever it looks like to the world, remains exactly what it is. A contract. No expectations, no emotions, no illusions." Isabelle's expression didn't change. "That suits me fine." "Good." He turned toward the window, expecting relief from the honesty of it. But instead, something unsettled him. Her calm wasn't compliance. It was control. It was as though she'd already decided how much of herself he would never get to touch. He hated how much that intrigued him. Hours later, the mansion slept. The rain came soft and steady, tapping on the windows like a forgotten rhythm. Cole lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The ghost of her voice replayed in his mind low, even, with that hint of sadness beneath every word. He had been surrounded by women, all his life models, heiresses, actresses. each more polished than the last. They knew how to perform affection. Isabelle didn't perform. She simply existed, like a note that refused to resolve in his symphony of order. Somewhere down the corridor, he heard music, a single, trembling note from the piano. He rose without thinking, followed the sound through the dark hall until he found her sitting at the instrument, barefoot, still in her wedding dress. The white fabric pooled around her like spilled light. The melody was soft, at first hesitant, broken as if she were trying to remember something that no longer belonged to her. Then, gradually, it grew stronger. Cole stood in the doorway, unable to move. The way she played it wasn't skill that caught him, though she clearly had plenty of that. It was emotion, grief wrapped in grace. When the final note faded, Isabelle didn't look up. "You shouldn't be watching me." "Then stop playing like that." She turned, surprise flickering across her face. "Like what?" "Like you mean it." Her laughter was quiet, bitter. "I stopped meaning anything years ago. Mr. Walker." Something in him tightened. "Don't lie. Not when your hands tell the truth." The tension snapped. She stood, the piano bench scraping softly against the floor. "You think you know truth, Cole. You live in glass towers and call them homes. You think honesty is something you can buy." He stepped closer. "And what do you call what you've done? Marrying a man you barely know for a family that sold you." Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "I call it survival." The word landed between them like a confession and a curse. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, almost gently, Cole reached for her veil, still draped over one shoulder, and lifted it away. His fingers brushed her skin warm, alive, and the brief contact jolted them both. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier. He whispered, "You're not what I expected." "Good," she said. "Neither are you." They stood close enough to feel each other's breath. He wanted to kiss her God. He wanted to, but something in her gaze stopped him. Not rejection, something deeper. Fear. Regret. He stepped back. "Get some rest, Mrs. Walker." She exhaled slowly. "Good night, Mr. Walker." As she turned away, he noticed her hands trembling, and he knew, without understanding why, that she was hiding something. When Cole returned to his study, the piano melody still lingered in his mind. It wasn't just music, it was a message, a plea, or perhaps an apology. He poured himself another drink, but the taste was different now. Bitter. On his desk lay the marriage contract, thick paper, sharp black ink, their signatures side by side. He traced his finger over her name, Isabelle Monroe Walker, the woman who had walked into his life like a storm in silk. He had told himself he didn't care who she was before this night, but that was already a lie. Meanwhile, in the quiet of her room, Isabelle sat by the window, watching rain trace silver paths down the glass. She pressed her palm to the cool surface, feeling the ache in her chest tighten. She had survived humiliation, poverty, betrayal, but not this. Not the guilt. She had lied to him. Not about her reasons for the marriage, those were obvious, but about something far older, far deeper. The truth sat in the drawer beside her bed, An envelope she'd carried for years, sealed with a faded crest, Walker Industries. Inside, a letter written in her mother's hand. She hadn't had the courage to read it again. Not tonight. Not yet. At dawn, the house was quiet except for the slow ticking of the clock downstairs. Cole found himself standing once more by the piano. The surface still held the warmth of her hands. He pressed a single key. The note echoed. Lonely. Incomplete. A strange thought came to him. Perhaps they were both unfinished songs. Two melodies that didn't belong together, but somehow shared the same rhythm. He wondered what she was doing at that very moment. If she, too, lay awake, wondering how two strangers could make a promise neither understood. Outside, the first light spilled across the marble floor. The rain had stopped, but the air smelled of something new, something waiting to be written. Cole closed the piano lid softly. Whatever this marriage was, it wouldn't stay silent for long. And somewhere behind the stillness, beneath the lies and the contracts, the first faint note of their unwritten symphony began to stir. The next morning, Isabelle woke to the faint smell of coffee in the air, the sound of soft footsteps crossing the hall outside. She sat up in bed, her wedding dress still crumpled at the foot of the bed, as though it had been carelessly discarded rather than worn for the first time by a bride. For a moment, she felt like she was dreaming. The extravagant mansion, the cold marriage, the man who had promised nothing more than an obligatory contract. And yet, something had shifted last night. Something unspoken lingered in the space between them, an electric tension, a quiet curiosity that couldn't be ignored. She had lied to him. Of course, she had. She always had to. In the world of the powerful, the rich, and the desperate, truth was always something to be carefully hidden. But last night, as their eyes met in the dim light of the ballroom, Isabelle felt the truth of something else, something she had tried to bury deep inside herself, the ache that had begun to resurface since the moment she met him. She couldn't deny it any longer. The man she married wasn't just cold, distant, and ruthless. He was also hurting, hiding behind layers of control, convinced that love was a currency he couldn't afford. And worse, the more she looked at him, the more she saw the same fear mirrored in his eyes that she had carried for years. The fear of needing someone, the fear of trusting the wrong person, the fear of losing what little control they had left. She stood up, her feet cold on the marble floor. She walked to the window, the morning light casting long shadows across the room. In the distance, the Walker estate stretched out, its manicured gardens, towering gates, and carefully maintained grounds, all part of the facade. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had become another piece of that perfect, hollow life. But the emptiness was something she had always known. Downstairs, Cole Walker stood by the breakfast table, staring at his reflection in the polished glass of the dining room windows. The sunlight had turned his face pale, washed out, as if the light itself were trying to reveal something he wasn't ready to face. He adjusted his tie in the mirror, but his thoughts kept returning to her, Isabelle. She had been unlike any woman he'd known, strong, unyielding, and oddly familiar. When he had kissed her hand last night, something had shifted, a crack in the cold shell he had built around his heart. That kiss, brief but intense, had told him more than words could. She wasn't the woman he thought she was: docile, grateful, and subservient. She was a force, one he hadn't yet learned how to handle, and he hated how that fact gnawed at him. It wasn't supposed to matter. She was a means to an end. But as the hours passed, the lie he'd told himself about their marriage began to feel thinner, weaker. The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The soft padding of her feet across the floor broke his reverie, and he turned to see Isabelle entering the room. She wore a simple robe, the fabric falling loosely around her shoulders. But even in the casualness of the moment, she was beautiful. She stood at the entrance to the room for a beat too long, and he saw the uncertainty in her posture, as though she was waiting for him to speak first. She had 1,000 questions, but she had learned long ago that silence was safer. She could ask him about the nature of their union, about his cold detachment, about the truth she could feel brewing between them, but she knew better than to rush it. "Good morning," she said quietly, her voice hesitant but still steady. "Good morning," Cole replied, though his tone felt stiff, like something still clung between them that hadn't yet been said. They sat at the breakfast table. He poured her coffee black, just the way she liked it. His fingers brushed hers as he passed the cup, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. Her eyes met his, and the space between them felt charged, alive with unspoken words. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of things neither of them wanted to say. Finally, Isabelle spoke. "I didn't expect this." His brow furrowed, but he didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained on her, searching for something. "What exactly did you expect?" She shook her head, as if to dismiss the question. "I don't know. I thought I was just a part of your contract. And what do you think you are now?" Her gaze dropped to the cup in her hands, but she didn't answer. The question lingered in the air, suspended like the morning mist. He watched her, his heart thudding heavier in his chest than it ever had before. It was absurd, wasn't it? He'd had women fall at his feet, adored and pursued by so many. But with Isabelle, the challenge was something else entirely. She was a riddle he couldn't solve, a song that didn't follow any rhythm he understood. And yet, he couldn't stop himself from wanting to know more. The hours passed slowly, each one dragging like the minutes between their stolen glances. They had a ritual, now breakfast at dawn, conversations that danced around the edges of truth, and a coldness that neither could fully shed. But every now and then, something cracked. A fleeting moment when they truly saw each other. And everything about this arrangement, the lies, the distance, the rules faded into the background. Isabelle was beginning to question her own resolve. That evening, after dinner, she wandered through the mansion, trying to find some peace in the silence. It was almost too much, too many rooms, too many mirrors, too many windows that opened into a world that didn't quite feel like hers. She needed something familiar, something to ground her. And then she heard it. A soft, hesitant note drifting down the hallway. The music. She followed it, the sound pulling her toward it like a magnet. When she reached the door of the music room, she hesitated before entering. Cole was there, his back to her, his fingers moving over the keys with practiced ease. The melody was unfamiliar, but haunting. It wasn't the sharp precision of a businessman at work. This was different. It was raw, personal. He didn't look up as she entered. The music continued. A complicated piece, a nocturne by Chopin. The notes cascading with such depth, such emotion, that it felt like they were both hidden within the melody. Isabelle stood at the threshold, watching him, her heart twisting with something unfamiliar. For the first time, she saw the man beneath the CEO, the cold strategist who ruled his empire with ruthless control. There was tenderness in his playing, a kind of pain that seemed to be buried deep inside him. Finally, he stopped, the final note lingering in the air. He turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "Chopin," he said softly, the words almost a confession. "I never knew you played." Isabelle replied, stepping inside, her voice quieter than usual. Not much anymore." She stepped closer, drawn by the music, by the vulnerability she had never expected to see in him. "Why tonight?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, the same storm swirling in his eyes. "It's harder than I thought." Isabelle raised an eyebrow, confused. "What is this?" He gestured between them, his hand sweeping through the space between them, as if indicating their entire situation. "You, me, this. Marriage." Her heart skipped a beat. Was this an admission? Or was he still hiding behind his walls? "You don't have to make it anything more than it is," she said softly, her own walls thickening once again. "We're bound by a contract. Cole. Nothing more." He stood, a flicker of something, anger, pain, longing crossing his face. But then he closed his eyes, a deep breath escaping his lips. "It's never been just that, and you know it." Isabelle's pulse quickened. The confession was there, right in front of them, and yet neither of them could touch it. The tension between them was no longer just about obligation. It had become something deeper, something neither of them had anticipated. "I don't know what I want from you," he murmured. "You don't have to," she replied, her voice steady but her heart racing. "You just have to keep pretending, like we agreed." Cole turned away, his fists clenching at his sides. "No, that's not good enough anymore." Before Isabelle could respond, the sound of the doorbell broke the stillness. The doorbell echoed through the silence of the mansion, a sharp, jarring sound that broke the fragile stillness between them. For a brief moment, neither Cole nor Isabelle moved. The music that had once swirled in the air now felt distant, as though it belonged to another world entirely. Isabelle's breath hitched. She had been so caught up in the raw honesty of the moment that she had forgotten the world outside their marriage. The world that always seemed to creep in when things threatened to get real. Cole's face hardened, the brief vulnerability he had shown slipping away like smoke. He turned toward the door with that same calculating expression, the mask sliding back into place. He was a man used to control, used to getting what he wanted without question. But she could see it now. There was something more he was hiding, something buried beneath the armor he wore so well. "I should get it," Isabelle said, her voice steady despite the turmoil twisting inside her. She took a step toward the door, but Cole's hand shot out, stopping her with a firm grip on her wrist. "No." His voice was low, more an order than a suggestion. "I'll handle it." She froze at the sudden contact, the electric shock of his touch seeping into her skin. The pull between them had never been stronger. She could feel the tension, thick and unspoken, stretching between them like an invisible thread. He looked at her, his gray eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite place. Maybe fear, maybe regret. "Cole?" Isabelle whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who is it?" He didn't answer. His jaw clenched, his features tight with something that felt like restraint. He turned abruptly and walked toward the door, his movements precise, controlled. He swung it open, revealing a man standing on the other side, a sleek black briefcase in hand. The man was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, his face unfamiliar. His eyes flickered toward Isabelle, a brief, calculating look, before he directed his attention back to Cole. "Mr. Walker," the man said, his voice low and formal. "I have the documents you requested." Isabelle's heart skipped a beat. Documents. What could they be? She watched from her place in the room, her gaze fixed on Cole as the man handed over the briefcase. Cole's expression never wavered. "Bring them to my office," he said, his voice flat. The man nodded and turned to walk away. But Cole's gaze lingered for a moment longer, his eyes sharp and distant. Isabelle stood frozen, her mind racing. Something wasn't right. The tension had shifted. It was like she had witnessed a small piece of a larger story, a story she wasn't yet a part of. Later that evening, Isabelle found herself wandering the halls again, as if the mansion itself was conspiring to keep her mind occupied. She passed the grand piano in the corner of the music room, the empty seat where Cole had played earlier, still unoccupied. The whole house seemed to be suffocating her, the stillness in the air growing heavier with every passing moment. She wasn't sure why she had come to this room again, perhaps because it was the only place that had felt real, the only place where she had glimpsed a side of Cole that wasn't hidden beneath layers of control. Her hand hovered over the keys for a moment, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that what she had felt last night when they were just two people in a room, sharing something fragile and real, wasn't just a fleeting moment. But doubts gnawed at her. She began to play, her fingers brushing over the keys softly at first, finding comfort in the familiar sound. The melody filled the room, a quiet counterpoint to the storm brewing in her mind. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. But even the soothing notes couldn't quiet the unease growing inside her. She was still playing when she heard footsteps in the doorway. Cole stood there, watching her. His presence was impossible to ignore, a weight in the room that shifted the atmosphere. "You play," he said softly, his voice barely more than a murmur. Isabelle didn't stop playing. She couldn't. The music was the only thing anchoring her to this moment, to the reality she wanted to hold on to. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked without looking at him. The question slipped out, quiet and almost lost in the flow of the music. His silence stretched between them, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. But then he stepped closer, his shadow falling across the piano. "I don't know what you mean," he said, his voice guarded. She stopped playing, the final note hanging in the air, unfinished. The documents, the man at the door. What's going on? "Cole, what aren't you telling me?" His jaw clenched, the tension in his shoulders telling her more than his words ever would. He took another step forward, his presence suffocating in its intensity. "I never wanted this to be more than what it was," he began, his voice rough. "I thought if I could keep everything in place, if I could control it all, then it would be easier. For both of us." Isabelle turned to face him, her eyes searching his, trying to find the man who had played Chopin with such tenderness. The man who had looked at her with something that might have been regret. "You think I want this too?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "You think I want to be part of your game, your perfect little life?" "No," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "But it's never been that simple." She stood there, the silence between them thick with the weight of his admission. For the first time, he was letting her see the cracks, letting her glimpse the person underneath. And it terrified him as much as it scared her. "Then what is it?" "Cole," she whispered. "What are you hiding?" He looked away, his eyes clouded with something she couldn't decipher. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, more vulnerable. "The man you saw earlier," he began, hesitating before continuing. "He's not just some business associate. He's involved in something I never wanted you to be a part of." Isabelle's heart skipped. "What does that mean? What are you involved in?" But before he could answer, the sound of a phone vibrating on the coffee table interrupted them. Cole's gaze shifted to the phone. "Excuse me," he said curtly, walking over to grab the phone. As he read the message, his expression hardened. He clenched his fist around the phone, his knuckles white. Isabelle could feel the shift in the air, the change in his energy. "Who was that?" she asked quietly. Cole didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens below. "They're getting closer," he muttered under his breath. "And now you're involved." "Isabelle." Her pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What do they want with me?" But Cole didn't respond. His face was set, cold once more, as though he had already made his decision. That night, as Isabelle lay in bed, the words that had been left unspoken kept her awake. Cole had always been a man of secrets, a man who knew how to manipulate the world around him. But now, she realized, the world was closing in on him and her along with it. She couldn't ignore the strange pull she still felt toward him, the connection they had, even in the midst of the chaos. But she also couldn't ignore the doubts, the creeping feeling that something was wrong, something deeper than just a marriage of convenience. When she finally closed her eyes, she dreamed of him. But this time, he wasn't just a stranger standing in the shadows. This time, he was a man with a choice, and Isabelle wasn't sure if he would choose her. The silence in the mansion felt different now, heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Every step Isabelle took through the grand hall felt weighted, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. She couldn't escape the tension, couldn't outrun the questions that circled in her mind like vultures, waiting for the right moment to strike. Cole's words from the night before echoed in her head. "They're getting closer." Who were they? And what did Cole really mean when he said she was now involved? Her fingers brushed the cold surface of the marble countertop, the chill seeping through her skin. She needed to know more, needed answers that felt like they were just out of reach, no matter how much she tried to ask. Isabelle couldn't shake the feeling that there were pieces of Cole, his life, his past, that he hadn't shared with her. She didn't know how far she could trust him, not after everything that had happened. And yet, there was something inside her, something fragile and soft, that wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that there was more to their story than just manipulation and obligation. Her mind flickered back to the brief glimpse of tenderness she'd seen in him, the way his eyes had softened when they'd been alone the night before. It was so fleeting, so quickly buried under layers of control, but it had been real. That much Isabelle was sure of, but real or not, there was a deeper truth that she needed to confront. She heard footsteps behind her, the familiar sound of Cole's presence before she even saw him. She didn't turn. Her gaze remained fixed on the garden beyond the large windows, the soft glow of dawn starting to pierce the shadows. "I've made us breakfast," Cole said, his voice calm, steady just like always. Isabelle didn't respond. She wasn't sure what to say. He took a step closer, the air between them thick with unspoken words. "I know you have questions. I'm not hiding anything from you." She finally turned to face him. Her heart stuttered for a moment, caught in the intensity of his gaze, but her mind was clearer now, sharper than it had been before. "You don't have to hide it." "Cole," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I'm not here to play games with you. I just want the truth." Cole's face didn't change, but there was something behind his eyes, something he was trying to keep locked away. "The truth isn't always easy to give," he replied. "But you deserve it. You deserve to know everything." Isabelle felt the weight of those words settle into her chest. He hadn't said it outright, but she could hear the underlying fear, the fear of losing her, the fear of what would happen if she truly knew who he was. "Then tell me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me why I'm involved. Tell me what this is all about." Cole hesitated, his jaw tight as though he were weighing the cost of revealing his secrets. Isabelle could see the internal battle raging within him, could see the way he struggled to balance the truth with the risk of tearing apart everything they had just started to build. Finally, he spoke, his words measured, careful. "There are people in my life, people I've been trying to protect you from. They don't care who you are. They don't care about the things that matter to us. All they care about is power, control, and money." Isabelle's pulse quickened. This was the moment, the truth, the thing she'd been searching for. But it only raised more questions. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice tight with growing unease. "And why are they after me? I'll explain everything," he said, taking a slow step toward her. "But not here. Not like this." Isabelle's eyes narrowed. "Why not?" "What's stopping you from telling me now?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for her hand, his touch gentle, almost apologetic. But Isabelle pulled back slightly, the distance between them more than just physical. There was an emotional gap between them now, one that she couldn't ignore. "I'm sorry for how this happened," he said, his voice low. "I didn't want you involved. I never wanted you to know about this world. But I can't protect you anymore. You need to know what we're up against." "Then tell me," she demanded, her frustration rising. "Tell me what I'm up against. What is it you've been hiding from me?" He took a deep breath, his hand still hovering near hers, but not touching. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, like he was wondering if he could trust her with the truth. "Let's go somewhere," he said finally. "Somewhere I can tell you everything. I need to take you there." Isabelle didn't know what to say. A part of her wanted to refuse, wanted to turn away and leave him to his secrets. But there was another part of her, one she couldn't ignore, that knew she needed to hear it. She needed to understand what had dragged her into this life, this web of lies and control. "Okay," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. The car ride was long, the silence between them thick and heavy. Isabelle couldn't help but steal glances at Cole, studying him in the dim light of the early morning. She had always been able to read him, to see through the walls he put up. But now, she felt the distance between them in a way she hadn't before. They reached their destination just as the sun began to rise fully, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. It was a quiet place, far from the mansion and the life they had built there. The building was small, unassuming, almost out of place against the backdrop of the city. Cole led her inside, his movements brisk, like he couldn't wait to get this over with. Isabelle followed him, her heart pounding in her chest. He stopped in front of a door at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. "This is where it all started," he said, his voice tight. "This is where I got involved with them." The door opened with a creak, revealing a room that looked nothing like the pristine, polished spaces of the mansion. This room was cold, utilitarian, filled with files and papers that seemed to tell a story of their own. "This is where it all began," Cole repeated, walking toward a desk in the center of the room. "I made choices, bad choices. And now, I'm paying for them. We're paying for them." Isabelle stood frozen in the doorway, trying to process what he was saying. Her mind raced with thoughts she couldn't quite connect. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cole turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "I've been trying to protect you from this world, from them." He gestured to the files scattered across the desk, the papers that seemed to hold so many secrets. Isabelle took a step closer, her curiosity outweighing the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "Who are they?" she asked again, her voice steady this time. Cole took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "The people who think they can control everything. And they want me, and they want you because of something I've done, something I can't undo." Isabelle felt her heart drop in her chest. "What do you mean?" she whispered again, the words barely escaping her lips. Cole walked over to a drawer and pulled out a small, tattered envelope. He opened it slowly, revealing a single photograph. He held it out to Isabelle, and she took it from him, her hands trembling. The photograph was grainy, but she could make out the image of a man standing with a group of people's faces she didn't recognize. But the tension in the image was palpable. The man in the center looked familiar, too familiar. "This is the man behind it all," Cole said quietly. "Marcus Thorne. He's the one who's been pulling the strings." Isabelle's breath caught in her throat as the name clicked into place. Marcus Thorne. The name had been lurking in the background for weeks now, a shadow she had never fully understood. And now, she did. "Isabelle," Cole said, his voice cracking with something she couldn't define. "I need you to understand. Everything I've done, everything I've protected you from, it's all been because of him." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "And now, you want me to trust you?" Cole nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate emotion. "I need you to trust me, Isabelle. I need you to believe in me, in us." Her heart was breaking in two, torn between the man she was falling for and the man she had just discovered. But as she looked at him, standing there, his walls finally crumbling, she realized something. She had a choice to make, and she wasn't sure what it was yet. But the answers she was searching for were just beyond the door, waiting for her. The room was bathed in the dim light of the afternoon sun, the shadows of the tall, narrow windows stretching across the floor like silent witnesses to the moment unfolding. Isabelle stood there, the photograph in her hand, trembling slightly, her heart racing with every word Cole had spoken. Marcus Thorne. The name felt like a weight on her chest. It was no longer just a shadow in the background, a whisper in the corners of her life. It was a full, undeniable presence, a force she couldn't escape. But more than that, it was the realization of a truth she hadn't wanted to face: Cole's past, his decisions, his entire world had led them here, to this point, to this moment. Isabelle's fingers tightened around the photograph as if it could anchor her to something solid, something real. The man in the picture, Marcus, looked as confident as ever, surrounded by people who looked like they were born into this world of power and manipulation. His smile in the photo was too clean, too rehearsed, the kind of smile that people in Cole's world wore when they didn't care about the people they stepped on to climb higher. Cole. Isabelle's voice faltered as she looked up at him. He was standing by the desk now, the lines of tension in his body more apparent than ever. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw tight as he waited for her to say something, anything. I don't know what to say, she whispered, the weight of his secrets pressing against her chest. You said you were protecting me. But from what exactly? What is it that you've done that's so bad? His gaze dropped, as though he couldn't look at her when she asked that question. The pain in his eyes was palpable. I've done a lot of things, Isabelle. Things I'm not proud of. But the thing I regret most. He hesitated, his voice cracking just slightly, is dragging you into all of this. You deserve better than the mess I've made, than the mess I've been trying to hide. Isabelle didn't respond right away. The words were too heavy to process. Instead, she walked across the room and placed the photograph back down on the desk. It felt almost like returning a piece of Cole's past to him, something he needed to own, something she couldn't carry for him. Is this really it? She asked quietly, her back to him. This is why we're here, because of your past, because of him. Cole didn't answer immediately. She could feel his gaze on her, the weight of his gaze that tried to reach her, to pull her back to him. But she couldn't turn around. Not yet. This isn't just about Marcus, Cole said, his voice barely above a whisper, but steady. It's about the things I've done to survive. Things I've done to protect my family and this company. Things that came at a cost. And now, Isabelle. He trailed off, his words hanging in the air like a ghost. Isabelle's heart raced as the silence stretched between them, unbearable and heavy with unspoken truths. He was giving her a choice whether to stay or leave. He wasn't forcing her, not this time. But the weight of that choice was unlike anything she had ever known. Turning slowly, Isabelle faced him, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make sense of this shattered reality. But when she looked at Cole, something in her softened. Despite everything, the lies, the secrets, the betrayals, there was still something in him that she couldn't ignore. I don't know what to do with this, she said, her voice barely audible. How can I trust you, Cole? After everything, you've kept so much from me, and I don't even know what you want anymore. She stepped closer, each step a battle with the conflicting emotions swirling inside her. What do you really want? Cole? Is this about protecting me? Or is this just about protecting yourself? His eyes flickered with something unreadable. I want you, Isabelle. More than anything. I want you to be safe. I want us to have a chance to build something real. Something that isn't tainted by my mistakes. But I know I don't deserve that. I don't deserve you. And I don't know how to make up for it. She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat rising like a storm cloud. Isabelle wanted to reach out to him, to reassure him that he hadn't lost her. But the anger, the confusion was too much. She was angry at him, angry at the situation, angry that she felt like she had been dragged into this world without her consent. And yet, she couldn't deny that a part of her still wanted to believe him. Believe him. Believe in him. The thought echoed in her mind, and she couldn't escape it. She could see it in the way he looked at her, the way he was begging for her to understand, to forgive him. He was broken. Yes. But so was she. I need to know more, she said softly, her voice steady but fragile. I need you to tell me everything, Cole. Not just the parts you think I can handle. All of it. Cole's expression softened, and he nodded slowly. I've already told you what you needed to know. Marcus is dangerous. He's been using me, manipulating me since the beginning. He's the one who's been pulling the strings, trying to force my hand. Isabelle's brow furrowed. What does he want from you? What does he want from us? Cole's jaw clenched, the anger rising in him again. But this time, it wasn't aimed at her. He wants to take everything from me, my company, my family, my life. He wants to control everything, and I've been too damn afraid to stop him. The words hit Isabelle harder than she expected. And me? She asked quietly. Am I just a pawn in all of this? Another piece in his game? No, Cole said, his voice firm now, filled with a raw conviction that startled her. You're not a pawn, Isabelle. You never were, and I'm sorry for making you feel like you were. You're the one thing that matters to me more than anything, more than all of this. He spread his arms out, gesturing to the chaos that surrounded them, the unfinished papers, the files that held more questions than answers. Isabelle felt something in her snap, a release of tension she hadn't known she was holding. But that feeling was brief, like a fleeting dream, before the reality of the situation came crashing down on her again. She had to make a choice, and she couldn't pretend that the choice was easy. I'm not like you, Cole, she said quietly, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. I don't have the strength to carry this. I can't pretend to understand this world. I can't be a part of it. Not like this. Cole's eyes darkened, his chest rising with a sharp breath, as if she'd just ripped his heart out. I'm not asking you to carry it. I'm asking you to stay with me, to fight with me. For us. Isabelle closed her eyes for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She was suffocating under the weight of her own emotions, torn between everything she had ever known and the man standing before her, the man she wanted so badly to trust, to believe in, but couldn't. She took a deep breath, her mind whirling with the consequences of what she was about to say. And yet, when she opened her eyes and looked at him, she knew. She knew what she had to do. I don't know what happens next, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I'll stay. For now, I'll stay. The relief that washed over Cole's face was palpable, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He reached out to her, his fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture so gentle it almost broke her. But the storm was far from over. Isabelle's heart was still uncertain, still battling with the knowledge that this wasn't just about them anymore. It was bigger than that, and she didn't know what she was walking into. But she would face it, with him, at least for now. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that fills the spaces between words and stretches out into eternity. Isabelle stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below, their soft glow mirrored in the reflection of her own face. Her thoughts were a tangled mess, each one pulling her in a different direction. She had made her choice to stay. But now, in the quiet aftermath, she wasn't sure if that decision had been the right one. It was easier when the world felt black and white, when the truth was clear. But now, with Cole, everything had turned into shades of gray. There was a part of her that wanted to believe in him, in them. But there was also a fear, a gnawing doubt that she couldn't shake. What had she gotten herself into? She turned from the window, her eyes meeting Cole's as he walked into the room. His expression was unreadable, his jaw tight, eyes shadowed by the weight of everything unsaid. She could see the effort he was putting into controlling himself, the way his body held back, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. She knew he was trying to rebuild what had been shattered, trying to win her trust back. But the fear that lingered between them was palpable. Isabelle, he started, his voice low, almost hesitant. I know this isn't easy, for either of us. She met his gaze, but didn't speak immediately. The truth was, she wasn't sure what she wanted to say anymore. She wasn't sure of anything. She could feel the distance between them, even though they were standing right in front of each other. They hadn't spoken much in the past few days, only the necessary words. The polite ones. The ones that kept the world moving forward without acknowledging the unspoken things that hung like a cloud above them. I don't want to hurt you, he said, his voice breaking the silence. I never did. But I can't pretend everything is okay. Not when there's so much we haven't dealt with, so much I still don't understand. Isabelle closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of his words sinking into her chest. She had spent so many nights in this house, this mansion that was both foreign and familiar to her now. It had once felt like a place she didn't belong, and now it felt like a cage, a beautiful, gilded cage. Then what are we doing? She whispered, almost to herself. She could hear the crack in her own voice, the rawness she had tried to bury. What do you want from me, Cole? His steps were slow, deliberate, as he crossed the room to where she stood. His presence felt like a storm, unpredictable and overwhelming, yet familiar. I want you to trust me, he said, his voice hoarse. I want us to figure this out, together. But I need you to believe that I'm not the same man I was when we first met. The words hung between them like a bridge over an abyss. He was asking her to leap, to trust that he could be different, that he was more than the man who had kept her in the dark, who had let her walk into this mess with blind eyes. But how could she? How could she trust him when the truth was still so tangled up in lies? I don't know how to trust you, Cole, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can. The honesty in her words cut deeper than any accusation. It was the truth they had both been dancing around, pretending it wasn't there. Cole stood there, his chest rising and falling with his breath, as if he had been holding everything in, waiting for her to say the very thing he feared most. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, he said quietly, stepping closer. But I'm asking for a chance, not for me, for us, because I know what we have is real, and I know I don't deserve it. But I want to try. I want to fix this. Her heart ached at the sincerity in his voice, at the vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show. The man who had always been in control, who had built walls around his emotions, around his past, was standing before her, broken and raw. And for the first time, Isabelle wasn't sure if she was ready to catch him. You've been asking me to trust you, she said, her voice trembling. But I'm still trying to trust myself. I'm still trying to figure out who I am in all of this. There was a long pause before Cole spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I understand that. I do. But I can't do this alone. Isabelle, I need you. And not just because you're the only thing that feels real in my life right now. I need you because I believe in us, even if we don't have all the answers yet. I believe we can figure this out. Isabelle swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words pressing against her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this was more than just a contract, more than just a mistake. But the doubts were still there, lurking beneath the surface, pulling her in different directions. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said softly. I don't know if I can forget everything you've kept from me, and I don't know if I can stay in this life, this world, that's so different from mine. I don't want you to forget, he said, reaching for her hand. I want you to remember, so we can move forward, together. You don't have to forget. Isabelle, you just have to decide if you want to keep fighting for us, if you still believe in what we have. His touch was gentle, a soft contrast to the storm of emotions swirling inside her. His fingers brushed against hers, a touch so tender, so fragile, that it threatened to break her. She could feel the heat of him, the desperation in the way he held on, and it made her want to pull away to protect herself. But she didn't. She couldn't. For all the doubts that clouded her mind, there was still a part of her that wanted to fight, a part of her that believed, despite everything, that maybe, just maybe, they could figure this out, that maybe love, even in its most broken form, could be rebuilt. I don't know how to do this, she whispered, her voice shaking. I don't know how to forgive you, but I want to try. I want to try. Cole. Cole's breath hitched at her words, and for a moment, he looked like a man who had just been given a second chance, a fragile, fleeting chance that he would hold on to for dear life. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll fight for you, for us. And for the first time in weeks, Isabelle allowed herself to believe him, not because the road ahead was clear, but because in that moment, she realized that maybe she wasn't ready to give up on him just yet. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to give up on them. The days following their quiet agreement were suffocatingly still. It was as though they had both come to a truce, each pretending to navigate the fragile peace between them, knowing full well that the truth too heavy to ignore was looming on the horizon. Isabelle had given him her trust, or at least the beginning of it, and in return, Cole had been present in a way she hadn't expected, offering her something more than apologies and empty promises. But peace, like everything else between them, felt temporary. The storm was never far behind. Isabelle had spent countless hours thinking about what they had, what they might have, and whether she was ready to face what was inevitably coming. She was sitting by the window again when it happened. The soft hum of the city outside seemed to magnify the silence in the room, making her feel like an intruder in her own life. The sound of the door opening caught her attention, pulling her from the fog of her thoughts. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The weight of Cole's presence was always felt, always near, lingering, like a shadow she couldn't escape. "I need to talk to you." His voice broke the silence, thick with urgency. Isabelle's heart skipped. She turned to him slowly, expecting another attempt at reconnection, another chance at starting fresh. What she hadn't anticipated was the storm in his eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at her with longing, now clouded with something darker, more conflicted. "What is it?" Her voice was careful, guarded, but not cold. "I found something," Cole said, taking a hesitant step forward. "Something I should have found before. Something I needed to find. I'm not proud of this." Isabelle stood up, her stomach churning as the tension in the room shifted. The walls that had been slowly rebuilding between them suddenly felt too thin. "What did you find?" she asked, the words tasting like acid as they left her mouth. "Photos." His voice cracked on the word, as if it were too much to say aloud. He took a breath, trying to steady himself. "Photos of you. With him." Isabelle froze, her eyes widening, her breath caught in her throat, a sharp sting of panic rising. "What are you talking about?" "The man you met. Brandon Hayes." "It's more than I thought. More than what you said." His voice was low, the words carrying the weight of accusation. "I didn't want to believe it, Isabelle. But the more I dug, the more I found. And now, I'm not sure what to believe anymore." A cold wave of dread washed over her. She had hoped, she had prayed that this moment would never come, that the delicate web they had been spinning between them would hold. But the truth was never so kind. "Cole, you don't understand." Isabelle's voice trembled. She stepped toward him, reaching out, but stopped herself. Her hands were shaking. "You don't know the full story. I never wanted you to. I know more than you think." He cut her off, his expression hardening. "I know the man you've been meeting behind my back. I know he's connected to him, to Marcus Thorne." Isabelle felt her world shift beneath her feet. She couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, suffocating. He's not what you think. It was never what you think." Her words came out in a rush. But the more she tried to explain, the more they tangled together. She had never planned on this, on Cole finding out about Brandon and the mess that had followed. She never meant for the lines to blur. But now she saw the truth. Her attempt to protect him had only led them to this precipice. Cole's eyes were sharp now, studying her like she was a stranger. The distance between them was more than physical. It was the space that had once been filled with love and hope, now swallowed by the shadow of doubt. "I want to believe you," Isabelle, he said, his voice quiet but firm. But I can't ignore the evidence. I can't just pretend that this doesn't matter. Tears burned behind Isabelle's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't. Not yet. Not when everything was falling apart. I'm not the woman you think I am, she whispered. But I'm not a liar. I never was. Her voice cracked as the weight of everything they'd been through hit her all at once. I did it for us. To protect us. To protect you. There was a flicker of something in Cole's eyes. Confusion. Anger. Frustration. But there was something else too. Something that held him back from letting go completely. He looked at her, as though searching for any shred of truth in her words. I thought I was doing the right thing, she continued, her voice barely a whisper. I thought I could fix things, make it right. But everything just keeps falling apart. I don't know how to make this right. I don't know if I can fix it anymore. For a long moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that spoke louder than any argument. It was as though time itself had paused, waiting for them to decide what came next. Cole took a step back, his eyes never leaving hers. His jaw was clenched, his fists tight by his sides. It was as if he was fighting with himself, the truth pulling him one way, and the love he still felt for her pulling him in another direction. I don't know what to do with this anymore, he said, the words heavy, each one carrying the weight of his indecision. I want to trust you, Isabelle. I really do. But I need to know the truth. All of it. She couldn't hold it in any longer. The truth was already spilling out, even though she had tried so hard to keep it contained. I'm sorry, she whispered, the apology feeling too small for the damage that had been done. But there's more to this. There's more you don't know. Cole's eyes narrowed, the flicker of anger returning to his gaze. What more? What else have you been hiding from me? His voice was strained, as if each word was more difficult to speak than the last. How many more secrets are there, Isabelle? How much more do I have to find out on my own? Her heart ached at the pain in his voice. The man who had once been so closed off, so controlled, was now standing in front of her, torn apart by the weight of everything they hadn't said. Cole, she said, her voice trembling. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you just trust me from the beginning? I couldn't, Isabelle said, her voice soft but steady. I couldn't trust anyone, not even myself. Not after everything that's happened. Then why are we even here? Cole's voice rose in desperation. If we can't trust each other, if we're just lying to each other, what's the point? Isabelle took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she pressed them together. She knew this moment was coming, the breaking point, the moment when everything would shatter, and there would be no going back. There's always a point, she whispered, her voice steady now, though her heart was anything but. We're at a crossroads, Cole, and we have a choice. We can either keep fighting for something we can't fix, or we can let go and move on. He stared at her, his chest rising and falling as he struggled with her words. He didn't want to let go. He couldn't. But Isabelle knew that this was the beginning of the end. There was no fixing what had been broken, no turning back from the truth they had both ignored for too long. And in that moment, as their eyes locked one final time, Isabelle knew that the hardest part wasn't choosing to let go. It was accepting that sometimes, no matter how much you want something, it's never enough. The days that followed were heavy, like a storm cloud that refuses to break. The space between them had stretched beyond words, filled with the kind of silence that spoke of too many unsaid things. Isabelle had taken a step back, retreating into herself as the weight of her choices pressed down on her chest. Every room she passed through in the mansion felt like a different world, an unfamiliar, cold world, one that she no longer knew how to navigate. She didn't have answers. She didn't know how to make sense of what had happened, let alone what was coming next. The only certainty she had was the growing ache in her chest, the quiet desperation to undo what had already been done. Cole, too, seemed to be caught in a loop of his own thoughts, his own confusion. He hadn't left. His presence was still there, like an unspoken agreement that they were both too afraid to break. But it wasn't the same. It could never be the same. The walls between them were no longer made of glass, but stone, unyielding and unforgiving. He had his own battle now, between the trust he wanted to believe and the reality that was too sharp to ignore. Isabelle spent her mornings by the window, staring out at the vast gardens, now just a blur of colors under the pale light. Her thoughts were endless, like the ripple of water that never truly settles. Did I do the right thing? Could I have trusted him more? Could I have spared him this pain? The irony was bitter. She had tried to protect Cole from the very truth that was now tearing them apart. She had built her own walls, too. Walls meant to protect her, to protect them both. But now those walls felt suffocating, trapping her in a life she never wanted to live. There was a knock on the door, soft, tentative, but unmistakable. She didn't need to ask who it was. She had known the moment it came. Cole stood in the doorway, his posture stiff, but his eyes, those gray eyes, now darker, more closed off than ever, spoke of a different battle. She could see the weight in them, the things he couldn't say, the things they both couldn't admit. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice low, careful, as if testing the waters. The words hit Isabelle like a punch to the gut, and she struggled to keep her composure. So this is it, she thought. This is the end. She had known this moment would come. How could it not? The tension, the distance, the unspoken betrayal, all of it had led to this inevitable conclusion. "Is that what you want?" Isabelle asked, her voice trembling with an emotion she couldn't hide. She didn't want to beg, didn't want to plead for something that was already slipping through her fingers. But she couldn't stop herself from asking. Cole didn't answer right away. His gaze shifted away from her, as if the weight of her question had taken him by surprise. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The quiet of the room seemed to deepen as he moved toward her, each step deliberate, each breath heavy with the gravity of the moment. "I don't know what I want anymore, Isabelle," he said, the words a confession, a revelation. "I can't pretend that everything's fine. I can't pretend that we're fine." He swallowed, his throat tight. "But I can't keep doing this, not knowing, not trusting. It's breaking me." Isabelle closed her eyes, trying to hold back the sting of tears. God, how could I let it get this far? She had never meant for it to happen this way. never wanted to be the one to break him. She could feel her heart cracking with every word he spoke. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I was just trying to keep you safe. Keep us safe." Cole took another step closer, the space between them now just a breath. "I know," he said softly, the hardness in his voice softening for a brief moment. "But we can't keep hiding behind those walls, Isabelle. We can't keep pretending that we're fine when we're not. I can't live like this. I can't love you this way." The finality of his words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Isabelle could feel her chest tighten, as if the air itself had become too heavy to breathe. She wanted to reach out, to hold him, to beg him not to go, but she knew that would be the very thing that would push him further away. "Cole, Her words caught in her throat, but she didn't need to say it. He had already made up his mind. He looked at her, his gaze softer now, but still filled with that distant sorrow. "I need space, Isabelle. I need to find out what I want, what we want. And right now, I can't figure that out here." He paused, his expression faltering for a brief second. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this, but I need time. Time to heal, time to think, time to decide if there was anything left between them." Isabelle nodded. Though it felt like a concession, it felt like the last straw, the final piece of herself that she was willing to let go. "Okay," she whispered, though it didn't feel like enough. The word was hollow. It wasn't an answer. Not really. Cole looked at her once more, as if trying to memorize every detail before he left. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. Isabelle stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. The silence that followed was deafening. The house, once filled with the promise of something new, now felt like a mausoleum of lost potential. The only sound was the thudding of her heartbeat, loud in her ears, the sound of her own collapse. 2 days later, Cole returned. Isabelle didn't expect it, didn't want it. But when the knock on the door came, it felt as though her whole world had shifted once again. The air between them felt thick, like the calm before a storm. When she opened the door, there he was. But this time, there was something different about him. His shoulders were less tense, his jaw less clenched. The storm in his eyes had settled somewhat. I've been thinking," he started, his voice uncertain, vulnerable in a way she hadn't heard in a long time. "And I don't know if it's right, but I know I can't keep running. We need to figure this out. We need to stop pretending that everything is okay when it's not. But I don't want to leave, Isabelle. Not without knowing if there's anything left worth fighting for." Isabelle's breath caught in her throat. She had been preparing for this, waiting for this moment, but hearing him say it aloud still made her heart race. Fight for us. Could she even do that anymore? Had they left enough of themselves in each other to rebuild from the wreckage they had made? "I don't know, Cole," she whispered, stepping back as though his presence was too overwhelming. "I don't know if we can. I don't know if there's enough left to fix this." But in the depth of his eyes, she saw the truth. He was right, there was something left, something fragile, something they both still wanted to salvage. The question wasn't whether they could save it, but whether they were willing to. Cole took a step closer, his hand outstretched. But he didn't touch her. Not yet. Instead, he spoke softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. I don't know if we can fix it either, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to fight for you, for us. If you'll let me. For the first time in days. Isabelle looked at him, truly looked at him, and she saw something more than the man who had hurt her. She saw the man who had loved her, the man who still wanted her. She saw the vulnerability that matched her own, and in that moment, as the weight of everything they had both endured settled between them, she realized something. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't have a perfect solution. But they had each other, and maybe that was enough. Isabelle took a deep breath, her heart still fragile, still uncertain. But as she reached for his hand, the first real step toward healing, she knew one thing was clear. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. The end.